It is objectively cooler to whip up dinner on the fly rather than pausing every 2 seconds because you gotta check that questionable YouTube recipe for the next step. Everyone's got a kitchen repertoire, the collection of dishes you can cook without a recipe. A great way to build that repertoire is to follow a 3 times per week rule where you plan to cook a new recipe or food 3 times in a single week. I'll show you what I mean with a case study. Banh Cuon, forgive me, are a Vietnamese dish made from thinly rolled rice sheets. Traditionally, they're steamed on a badass setup like this. It is a bit elaborate, but there are great alternative recipes using non-stick pans. I've never cooked this. I don't think I've ever even cooked Vietnamese food at home, which means there are massive holes in my knowledge and my ingredient list, which also means doing something I like to do but try to avoid: buying new ingredients. And that's the first big issue with new recipes: just basic home economics, food cost, and food waste. It's almost like cooking new recipes equates to eventually throwing out ingredients you're unfamiliar with. I feel like every cook has tossed a pack of Thai chilies after using like this much, and that always feels pretty damn bad. Here's everything I purchased and exactly what it cost me. I'll split it up into 2 categories. First, there's fresh food. They vary across cultures, but in general, produce and meat are quite versatile. So having odd scraps to use up isn't a huge curveball, although they do have a short shelf life. But by following a 3 times per week rule, you'll have a much easier time using fresh food before it goes bad. Second are pantry items. You always hear cooks talk about building a robust, reliable pantry you can turn to when you don't know what to cook. But these ingredients will stack up and outlive you if you don't actively try to use them up, like rice flour and tapioca starch. For Banh Cuon, you could opt for a pre-made mix, which has the benefits of being cheaper and easier. I like the raw ingredients because they're more versatile for future cooking. That decision, though, is entirely up to you. This doesn't even include ingredients I already owned. The topic of buying and storing ingredients could easily be its own video, so for now, I'm going to repackage and label items in an attempt to prevent things from vanishing into the pantry hellscape. Then I'll cook meal number 1, a solo lunch plate, which had me smacking myself for not cooking Vietnamese sooner because it's unreal. In contention for one of the best cuisines. I'm missing chalua, which I skipped in an attempt to not overbuy ingredients that I might not use. Hopefully that's not offensive. I'm doing my best to respect this dish, but I also don't fear retribution since like 63 people will see this. I also forgot the fried onion garnish, yet it's still delicious. I did eat a massive slice of humble pie trying to steam these things. You're seeing the best of it, but most of the rice rolls started to fall apart and I was happy to scrape out 2 for lunch. This is why your first attempt at a difficult recipe is ideally smaller, like dinner or lunch for 1 or 2, because things can definitely go south. Meal number 1 should serve as an introduction to the food in a non-overwhelming way. If you're going to proceed to a bigger dinner, make sure you allocate an extra chunk of time because your brain is assuming it will all go smoothly now that you have a bit of experience. But chances are it still won't. That lands me at meal number 2. Now that I've tested the recipe, I'm going to sandbag some of the components to save myself time for meals 2 and 3. I'll double up on the pork and mushroom filling, the nuoc cham sauce, and the batter. Sandbagging is a bit like meal prepping. The idea is to stockpile pieces of a meal to make dinner easier and faster. If you're thinking that it would be much more efficient to make more of everything on the first go round, you're not wrong. But it's generally smarter to test a recipe before stockpiling, lest you end up with a lot of something you don't like. It's also a great time to mix in any leftovers from meal number 1. I don't have to freeze anything or worry about any of this going bad because I'm using it all this week. Meal number 2 is about addressing problems and dialing in technique. Banh Cuon are very nuanced. They require finesse, and that takes practice. I noticed that if the batter doesn't set up on contact with the pan, then the rice sheets form holes that deteriorate. So heat control is crucial. A technique like this involves a lot of troubleshooting. How thin to layer the batter, how to extract the rice rolls without tearing them, the correct amount of filling to use, rolling on an oiled surface versus in the pan. All of this while considering my personal preferences versus honoring tradition, authenticity, and ingredients. For example, I like a really finely mixed filling, so I'm using my hands to crush the dry wood ear mushrooms before soaking them. I like it, but maybe that's just something you don't do. I don't really know. I thought I would nail meal number 2, which is hilarious because things mostly just fell apart. Stacking the Banh Cuon on a large serving dish was a clear mistake because extracting them exposed just how doo-doo of a job I did. Meal number 2 sent me back to the internet to do a bit more research before meal number 3, which is about kitchen flow. Repeating a meal on a short time scale syncs the recipe into your working memory. As a result, your cooking becomes smoother. If I were to space out these 3 dinners over a year, I would probably be lost every time. The 3 times per week numbers are somewhat arbitrary, but this is the point. Repetition within a short time window. For tonight, I have these prepped components which will further streamline the meal. But I did run into an issue. After the second meal, both my brother and I had some mild yet non-trivial gastro issues, and I'm thinking the pork might be the culprit. It was heavily discounted and it smoked kind of right on the edge of not good, so I didn't want to feed it to everyone just in case. I could have ran out and purchased more pork, but we had frozen shrimp, and the ultimate goal is to become familiar enough with a new recipe so that you as a cook can take the technique and work it into your home cooking with what you have. Oftentimes that means you don't have the perfect ingredients. At the same time, I didn't really want to disrespect Banh Cuon with some whack dish of my own, known, but I did come across Vietnamese and Chinese variations that occasionally do use shrimp. So rolling with what I had at home, I thawed, deshelled, dried, and salted the shrimp before tossing them in some rice flour and searing them in vegetable oil. Sticks of jicama made a fantastic side in place of bean sprouts, which I also ran out of. Using up more rice flour and an entire jicama was a bonus. So yeah, meal number 3 ended up being easily my most successful. The rice sheet execution was much better, and serving up on individual plates is a good move. I learned a hell of a lot with this dish, and it's cool now being familiar with what is an incredible cooking technique. Like I said, this was just a case study. There are endless dishes like this that can teach you heaps. I would recommend something like tadig, another somewhat difficult technique to pull off, but once you do, you can turn out a mind-bustingly good plate of rice that will elevate an entire dinner. Some people like to poo-poo recipe cooking in favor of ingredient-based cooking, and I totally get it. On top of every other reason, it's sexy to do the whole I don't need a recipe shtick, but the thing is that cooking by the seat of your pants is only possible after you've learned from recipes. You can't apply techniques to turn leftover fridge ingredients into a weeknight dinner if you don't train yourself in those techniques in the first place. So, I encourage you to pick something new and cook it 3 times in 1 week.